All right, so we're going to look at this first little set of looking at how questions develop. This set of slides here is essentially the people that have done in the past. What I had you do is to look and say ask a series of questions, find out what the person did yesterday. But I want you to look at the way the questions are asked. This gets it much like surveys, that upfront work of when you're designing your questions. When you review research that's been done and questions, you start to look at things like this. What are they? So here I might ask the question, the answer, the question, answer. What are they getting at? So here it looks like, right, they start with, please describe your course. How did you get to school? What's on campus? Parking. So what's the issue in these questions when you look at it? The beginning is a warm-up. Every interview needs a warm-up. If you're going to talk to somebody, you need to get them comfortable. In an interview, any of you who've been to an interview would maybe know that there was, in a typical interview, somebody's looking to hire will start with, tell me a little bit about yourself, and all that's just to get you to warm up, try and get you settled down comfortable a bit so you'll speak freely. So here you've got very directed questions. The warm up, what's the issue? Parking on campus? And I wonder, is it? Or as you look further, I sort of think maybe actually it's something different than that. So as you do the looking at what are they after here? Here's the issue. Now we've got some question styles. Open question. Requires a response, requires consideration of what they're going to say, not just simply answering yes or no. The more, again, of the open question. Leading. Leading is not yes, no. Leading goes beyond that. If the bus fares were reduced, yes, no question. Yes, no question. If government taxes, if the government was to provide money, would that change it? So on that last slide, I think what they're getting at is government subsidies for school, for parking. Now let's move to this slide. When we get here, you might dissect the set of questions and try and figure out what the issue is because they may not tell you right off the top. Here's another set, like a survey. They've broken them down. This set of questions, when you separate the questions out by themselves, much like designing a survey, you ask yourself, how do I want to categorize the material, the data that I'm going to collect? So here the person split the day up into 4 parts. You have 4 categories. It speaks to sampling. You've got morning to breakfast, wake up to breakfast, breakfast to lunch, lunch to dinner, dinner to bed. 4 categories. Now you take that data, whatever answers you get and what the possible answers are, you sort them in, and then they load into essentially a spreadsheet like Excel. So given time frame A, B, C, what are the possible answers? A, B, C, D. So this makes it easy to quantify your results. Surveys work well with quantitative research because surveys get at those questions: demographics, age, where do you live, postal code, socioeconomic status, income, gender that I saw some talking about. What are the issues with gender? What's left out is what you start to ask yourself. And throughout, for me and research, I always ask the questions, what do I think they left out? Bias that we're trying to remove in research, this is where you start to see it, is because it's what they leave out. That thing that I didn't even pay attention to, I didn't recognize because I've never experienced, I have no exposure, is the things that I leave out. Good research is digging through it. So these become leading questions like before, except they're not yes, no. They lead the person's mind to the place I want them to go. Like taking a child by their hand and guiding them to where I want them to go. That's what I do with this. I'm going to lead them to. So after lunch, tell me about that. More, I'm digging deeper. Bias. Here's where you start to get bias or exposure to something that's gone on before. What kind of movie did you watch? So there's some discussion. Movie, we watched The Kingdom. Why do you love that movie? So you've either got bias, it's a great movie, the interviewer is aware of, or the interviewer knows something about what this person already talked. Maybe they had a prior discussion. Could have been something going on, something to consider in your real world of social work, ECE, when counseling's involved. This could occur in any professional environment. If you have a discussion with somebody and then go to the formal interview, make sure when you start that formal interview that you talk to them. You raise what was discussed prior, you paraphrase it, you get it on the recording, video, audio, make sure it's in there. Because if it pops up like this, then I think you're into trouble. So It looks like, and I'll show you how that works in just a minute. The bias. We've got somebody here. Tell me about your day. I went to the gym, worked out. We get gym activity. Then when you got home, why did you do that? What did you do? Why does the researcher jump from the gym to home? And oddly enough, the answer says, and we drove to Niagara Falls. What took the interviewer's mind to that place? Was the interviewer aware of something? This happens. Many people have landed in a courtroom, ECE, social work, police officers, who've interviewed a child or a person, but the questions that show up on the formal interview look like the interviewer already knew the answer. That's what lawyers do. Lawyers, they don't ask a question in a courtroom unless they know the answer. So when you ask a question that's significant or interesting, then they see that as you've stepped into something you're already aware of, and now maybe you've led the witness, and especially when it comes to children. It turns into the discussion about maybe you guided the child to the place you wanted them to go. Something to consider in it. The purposes of the questions, when you think about when you're going through them, what are you doing? Here we've got start about the day. The person says stress. Stress, okay. How did it stress you out? And they answer in a way that says we need to sidetrack. You wouldn't see this in surveys. And this is where you start to see the difference between the survey and the qualitative interview. The qualitative interview allows you to flow off. Go down the path. They raised it. It's an issue for them. You need to deal with it. Don't ignore it. If you ignore it, you're ignoring them. You don't have an interview that's got a feel to it. So here you've got in that closer interview, you're going to shift off of your questions. You do not have to ask all of your questions in your order. They are just a guideline to start you. You lean to them, but you don't need to follow them. If you got to get sidetracked, get sidetracked. And then later, come back to where you left off. Go back to that place. And I'll talk about that in the next slides. That is about where do you make a note? How do you make your notes that help you to get back there quickly and easily and keep your flow alive? Skip overs are never good. This set of questions ultimately are confusing. Where are they? What are they doing? This data is of little value to you because you don't really know what fits where, what's it about. It's flawed just by virtue of bouncing around. This is an unplanned interview. So take 5 minutes. Right out, so the core issues you want to get to, maybe the questions. Open-ended, I asked in your labs to do open-ended because open-ended gets them to talk, and that's what it's all about, is getting them comfortable and getting them to talk. This is the key to a good interview, in my mind, intersubjectivity. You want to make it social. First set of questions, how was your day? What interrupted you? How often does that interruption happen? Those are very factual. Tell me something happened. This fourth question, though, gets at the person's feelings. Do you find this positive or negative? Feelings, emotions, opinions. That says the person I'm talking to matters. If I listen to you tell me about how you feel, it's because you matter. If I ask for your opinion, I ask for opinions of people that I think have got something worth hearing. You matter. That opens the door to a feeling of connectedness in the room. Intersubjectivity is the core piece in getting a good interview. When you get to qualitative, absolutely, this is what you're trying to develop. A lot of the interview may be that. If we look at the Williams interview, there's 3.5 hours of developing that relationship, and in the end, finally getting the questions that they were there for answered. So here's another set. You run down the list. You've got what did you do yesterday, all day. You've got everything's just kind of structured. It seems that this follows gently. Came home at 7 and watched and ate pizza. Why does the interviewer jump to 8 o'clock? When I read that, I say, and there was a fight, 8 o'clock was something interesting. Ooh, that interviewer is aware of something. I'd be concerned about that. I'd be concerned about bias slipping into my interview. Is there a problem with the research? The research collection is bad, therefore I'm not going to rely on it. Something to consider very much. What you know and don't know. And is never good. Imagine this. So, go to Buffalo, watch a game. Who won? Oh, the blue team. So what does that answer? Does that answer who they cheered for? Who won? What's the blue team? Blue? Toronto? Buffalo? Who knows? So you need to clarify. And is never good. Ask one or the other. This is normal in conversations. We want the interview to feel like a conversation. It is a conversation, but it's a guided conversation. And that's the difference. And then when we get to this last one, Routine is always an issue. Somebody says, I did this, this is my routine, it's what I usually do. Those are nice answers. They're easy, can be evasive. They don't get at the point. If somebody uses the term that sounds vague, you need to come back and clarify. If they use a vague description or a vague explanation, come back and ask for detail. They tell you they have a certain routine they follow, you need to say to them, yesterday, did you follow it? Because for your data to be meaningful, you have to have actual answers, not maybes. Yes, no, it did, didn't, what's the routine? Okay, I did this, that's my routine. Did you follow that routine exactly? Oh, did you get up and go to the bathroom, take a shower, get dressed? Did it go in that order? Was there something different? Oh, wait a minute, what was breakfast? So routine, look for the vague answer and get some clarity. If you do it nicely, it's not a mean, hostile, like your parents interrogating you. If you do it nicely, it's a sense of getting some explanation that makes sense of what they have to say. So that's the beginning of looking at surveys and shifting from the survey question, the way you form your questions, over to the interview, which is the next video. It's a long one though.